Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Brandon Mitchell, and the 6:47 a.m. emergency call that changed everything still echoes in my head 3 months later. I was pouring my second cup of coffee in the Rocky Mountain National Park Ranger Station when dispatch crackled through my Motorola radio with coordinates that made my hand freeze halfway to my mouth. Unit 47, we have a code yellow at grid reference 403428 degree N, 105.6836 degree W. Missing person, female, 23 years old. Family reported her overdue from solo camping trip as of 0630 hours. The coordinates put her in Sector 7, the section of forest I'd been avoiding for 2 years, ever since the incident with the Henderson family that cost me 6 months of sleep and a marriage. My supervisor's voice cut through the static. Mitchell, you're primary on this one. Victim's name is Ashley Nicole Rivera, last seen yesterday at 1400 hours near the old access road. I keyed the radio with fingers that had already started their familiar tremor. Copy dispatch. Unit 47 responding to grid 40.2428 north, 105.6836 west, ETA 15 minutes. But as I grabbed my search pack and emergency beacon, Ashley's mother's voice from the initial call played back through my earpiece, desperate, breaking. She was researching something for her graduate thesis, something about military experiments in the park during the Cold War. She had all these old documents, maps of facilities that supposedly never existed. Please, Ranger Mitchell, she's all I have left. The metallic taste of adrenaline flooded my mouth as I drove the Park Service truck down the winding mountain road. My shoulders crept up toward my ears without permission. That old defensive posture I'd developed since learning that some things in these mountains didn't follow the laws of nature I'd been trained to understand. The steering wheel grew slippery under my palms as sweat formed despite the October morning chill. Ashley's campsite sat exactly where her GPS tracker had last pinged. A perfect clearing beside Willow Creek. Her orange tent still zipped tight, camp stove positioned precisely on a flat rock with a pot of what looked like yesterday's oatmeal still sitting on the burner. Her hiking boots were lined up neat as parade soldiers outside the tent flap. Everything screamed of careful organization, not the chaos of an emergency departure. I crouched beside her fire ring, touching the ashes, cold for hours, maybe since last night, but that wasn't what made my breathing shallow and rapid. Scattered around her campsite like fallen leaves were photocopied documents, declassified military reports dating back to 1953, detailing something called Project Apex, and what the heavily redacted pages referred to as Enhanced Biological Warfare Development. One document, partially burned at the edges, made my vision narrow to a pinpoint tunnel. Test Subject 7 exhibits unprecedented adaptive intelligence and physical capabilities beyond initial projections. Recommend immediate termination protocols before cognitive development reaches critical threshold. Dr. Margaret Chen, Project Director, October 15, 1962. My hands shook as I photographed each document with my department-issued phone. In the margins of several pages, Ashley had written notes in purple ink. Local sightings, 1963-1965. 3 missing hikers, never found. And in larger, more urgent handwriting, it's still out there. The radio crackled. Unit 47 status report. I keyed the mic, trying to keep my voice steady. Campsite located, subject not present, no signs of struggle, but... I hesitated, looking at the scattered papers. Dispatch, I need you to run a background check on Project Apex military designation circa 1960s, and contact the family, find out exactly what Ashley Rivera was researching. Copy that, 47. Anything else? I was about to respond when I noticed something that made every muscle in my neck lock tight as steel cables. At the edge of Ashley's campsite, pressed deep into the soft earth beside the creek, was a footprint. Human-shaped, but wrong. Too long, too narrow, with what looked like claw marks extending from where toes should be. And it was fresh. Water was still seeping into the depression from the disturbed soil. Unit 47, you there? I stared at that impossible print and felt the same psychological fracture I'd experienced 2 years ago, when logic and reality started their violent divorce in my mind. My breathing became superficial, quick gasps that didn't seem to pull in enough air. Negative dispatch, beginning grid search pattern, will report in hourly. I followed Ashley's trail from the campsite, her boot prints clear in the morning mud, leading north toward the restricted section of the park that had been off limits to civilians since the 1960s. The trail was easy to follow for the first quarter mile, but then something changed. Her prints became erratic, sometimes veering sharply left or right as if she was trying to avoid something, or being herded. And woven between her tracks was that other print, the wrong one. Sometimes walking parallel to hers, sometimes crossing over, always maintaining a calculated distance that suggested intelligence, patience, strategy. My phone buzzed with a text from dispatch. Urgent. Spoke with Ashley's roommate. She found classified docs suggesting Project Apex experiment escaped containment in 1962. Subject believes it's been living in the forest for 56 years. Family extremely concerned about her mental state. The words blurred as I read them. 56 years. I did the math involuntarily. Whatever had escaped would be impossibly old by now, unless the genetic modifications had affected aging, longevity, cellular repair. I keyed my radio for the hourly check-in, but got only static. Then I realized I couldn't hear any birds. The forest had gone completely silent around me, as if every living thing had suddenly fled. Even the wind through the pine branches had stopped. That's when I heard Ashley's voice. Help me. Please, someone help me. Faint, distant, coming from the direction of the old military access road that wasn't supposed to exist on any current maps. My body reacted before my brain could process the implications. Feet moving automatically toward the sound, hand instinctively reaching for the emergency flare on my belt. But my mind kept running those calculations. If something with enhanced intelligence had been living in these mountains for 5 decades, learning, adapting, watching, what would it know about human behavior? What would it understand about how to call for help in a voice that would make rescuers abandon caution? Ranger Mitchell? Is someone there? I'm hurt. The voice was definitely Ashley's. I recognized it from the voicemail her mother had played for me that morning. But something about the cadence was wrong, like someone doing an imperfect impression of human speech patterns. I stopped walking and reached for my radio, hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped it. Only static. My phone showed no signal bars. The GPS coordinates on my device kept flickering between my actual location and somewhere that registered as location not found. The temperature around me plummeted 15 degrees in the span of 30 seconds. My breath came out in visible puffs as sweat simultaneously broke out across my forehead. My body's thermostat completely confused by terror signals my brain couldn't categorize. Please, I can see you through the trees. I'm trapped under some fallen logs. I could see her now, maybe 50 yards ahead through the pine trunks. Ashley Rivera, exactly matching the photo her mother had shown me. Blonde hair in a practical ponytail, green jacket, khaki hiking pants. She was waving weakly with one arm while the other appeared pinned beneath a massive fallen tree, but she was in the wrong place. The prints I'd been following led north, but Ashley was calling from the west, and when she waved, the movement was too fluid, too graceful for someone who'd been trapped under crushing weight. My radio suddenly burst to life with my own voice. Unit 47 to dispatch. I've located the missing subject. Coordinates 40.3445 degree N, 105.68401 degree Lio. Requesting immediate medical evacuation. I stared at the radio in my shaking hand. I hadn't made that call. Copy, Unit 47. Medical helicopter en route. ETA 12 minutes. The Ashley figure ahead of me smiled and began waving more enthusiastically, but the smile was wrong too. Too wide, showing too many teeth. As I watched through my binoculars, her face seemed to shift slightly, features rearranging themselves like they were being adjusted by an invisible hand. That's when I remembered Dr. Chen's note about adaptive intelligence and cognitive development. Whatever had escaped from Project Apex hadn't just survived 56 years in the wilderness. It had been learning, studying, perfecting its ability to mimic human appearance and behavior. And now it had learned how to imitate my voice on the radio frequency, calling in medical evacuation to bring more potential victims directly to its location. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Brandon Mitchell's situation? Comment below. I backed away slowly, trying not to make any sudden movements. The Ashley thing continued waving, but I noticed it wasn't blinking. At all. And its chest wasn't rising and falling with breath. My phone suddenly buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Hello, Ranger Mitchell. I've been watching you for 2 years, ever since you encountered my earlier work with the Henderson family. I've been very curious about how you survived that experience. The message continued. Ashley Rivera was researching me, so I decided to research her. And through her, research you. Did you know fear has a very distinct electromagnetic signature? Your brain produces fascinating patterns when confronted with the impossible. I fumbled with my phone trying to call for backup, but every number I dialed connected to the same voice. The thing that sounded like Ashley, but with that wrong cadence. Unit 47, this is your backup responding to your location. We can see you through the trees. Stay exactly where you are. My vision started to narrow again, peripheral sight disappearing as if I was looking through an increasingly small tube. The forest around me began to feel simultaneously too close and impossibly vast. Time seemed to slow down and speed up at random intervals. Another text. I've been studying human psychology for decades, Ranger Mitchell. Fear, hope, desperation, such predictable patterns. Ashley Rivera thought she was hunting me, but she was simply following the trail I laid out for her, just as you're following the trail I'm laying out for you. The Ashley figure ahead had stopped waving and was now standing completely motionless, head tilted at an angle that would have broken a human neck. When I looked at it through my binoculars, it appeared to be staring directly back at me, despite the fact that I was concealed behind trees. I'm not just mimicking Ashley Rivera's appearance, Ranger Mitchell. I have her memories, her knowledge, her understanding of how desperately her mother loves her, how desperately her mother is counting on you to bring her home safely. My legs felt like they might give out completely. I sat down hard against a pine tree, pine needles sticking to my sweat-soaked uniform shirt. The radio in my hand crackled with what sounded like helicopter rotors in the distance. The medical evacuation you didn't call for is real, Ranger Mitchell. They're coming to extract what they believe is an injured civilian. Unless you warn them, they'll land directly in my territory. And I'm very curious about how fear manifests in a group dynamic versus individual psychological breakdown. I tried to key my radio, but my hands were shaking so violently I couldn't manage the simple button press. When I finally made contact, my own voice responded, Unit 47 to helicopter pilot, abort mission. Do not land. Repeat, do not land. But then the real helicopter pilot's voice cut through. Unit 47, we have visual on your position and the injured party. Beginning descent in 30 seconds. No! I screamed into the radio. It's not human! Ashley Rivera is not at these coordinates. Abort immediately! Static. Then the sound of rotors getting closer. The Ashley thing in the clearing ahead suddenly moved with impossible speed, covering 50 yards in what looked like 3 fluid steps. It was now close enough that I could see its face clearly, and what I saw made my sanity take another significant step toward the edge. It was Ashley Rivera's face, perfect in every detail, but the eyes were looking in slightly different directions, as if they were operating independently. And when it smiled at me, I could see that behind the perfect white human teeth was another row of teeth, and behind those, another row, descending back into darkness. I want you to understand something, Ranger Mitchell, it said in Ashley's voice. But now the words seemed to be coming from multiple points around me simultaneously. I'm not just a genetic experiment that escaped. I'm what happens when human enhancement research succeeds too well. I'm what your species could become if you weren't so attached to concepts like mercy and restraint. The helicopter was directly overhead now. I could see the medical team preparing to rappel down. The girl you're looking for has been dead for 18 hours. But her death taught me so much about human psychology. The initial denial, the bargaining phase, the desperate hope that rescue would come. She showed me how to perfectly mimic the sounds of someone who still believes they might be saved. I forced myself to stand, legs trembling like I was standing on a ship in rough seas. Where is she? I consumed her, Ranger Mitchell. Not just her flesh. That would be wasteful. I absorbed her knowledge, her memories, her understanding of human emotional patterns. She's part of my cognitive matrix now. In a sense, she'll live forever. The medical team was fast roping down into the clearing. I watched them approach the Ashley thing, which had resumed its perfect imitation of an injured hiker. "Help is here," one of the paramedics called out. "We're going to get you out of here." I started running toward them, screaming warnings, but my voice seemed to disappear in the forest air. The Ashley thing looked up at the approaching paramedics with an expression of such perfect gratitude and relief that even I almost believed it for a moment. Then it moved. What happened next lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it's burned into my memory with photographic precision. The thing that had been mimicking Ashley Rivera unfolded itself, revealing its true size and shape. It was roughly humanoid, but stretched, elongated, standing nearly 8 feet tall with arms that reached almost to the ground. Its skin was pale gray and looked like it could shift and flow to take on different appearances. The paramedics never had a chance to process what they were seeing before it was over. When I finally reached the clearing, there was no sign of the medical team except for a helicopter that was now broadcasting a Mayday signal on automated loop. The Ashley thing was gone, but there were new tracks leading deeper into the forest. 4 sets of human footprints that showed no signs of struggle, as if the paramedics had simply decided to take a walk. My radio crackled with multiple voices: search and rescue teams, my supervisor, the helicopter pilot who was somehow still alive and coherent. Unit 47, we need immediate assistance. My crew is missing. Something in that clearing. Something that looked like the missing girl but wasn't. Jesus Christ, Mitchell, what is that thing? I keyed my radio with hands that had gone completely numb. All units, stay away from Sector 7. Do not approach the coordinates I provided. We're dealing with something that's not human, not animal, not anything we have protocols for. Mitchell, what's your status? Are you injured? I looked around the clearing where Ashley Rivera had supposedly been trapped, where 3 experienced paramedics had just vanished. The ground showed signs of massive displacement, as if something very large had moved very quickly, but there was no blood, no torn clothing, no signs of violence. Dispatch, I need you to contact Military Command. Ask them about Project Apex 1962. Ask them what happens when enhanced biological warfare experiments aren't terminated when recommended. Mitchell, you're not making sense. Return to base immediately for debriefing. But I couldn't leave, because I'd found something else in the clearing. Ashley Rivera's actual body, or what was left of it, carefully concealed beneath a pile of pine branches about 30 yards from where the Ashley thing had been standing. She'd been dead for hours, just like it said. But her face was missing. Surgically removed, not torn or damaged, but carefully extracted, like someone had been practicing. My phone buzzed with one final text. Thank you for the learning experience, Ranger Mitchell. I now understand human pack behavior, authority structures, and emergency response protocols much better. I also have 3 new sets of memories to explore. The real Ashley Rivera's graduate research was particularly useful. She'd identified 12 other potential military test sites across North America. I think it's time I visited some of them. The message continued. You survived our encounter 2 years ago because I was still learning patience. You've survived today because I'm no longer interested in quick consumption. I'm building something larger now. A network. A collective. Your species calls it many things, but I prefer to think of it as evolution. Give my regards to Mrs. Rivera. Tell her Ashley's sacrifice contributed to something far greater than a graduate thesis. Tell her Ashley will live forever now, in a way. I spent the next 6 hours in that clearing, waiting for backup that kept being redirected by false radio calls, calling for help on a phone that somehow kept connecting to the voices of people I knew were already dead. When the real rescue team finally found me at sunset, I was catatonic, clutching Ashley Rivera's thesis notes and muttering about genetic experiments and missing faces. The official report lists Ashley Rivera as a victim of a tragic hiking accident. The missing paramedics are classified as a helicopter crash with bodies not recovered. My supervisor has me on administrative leave, pending psychological evaluation. But I still have Ashley's research, 12 other sites across North America, where genetic experiments were conducted between 1950 and 1970. And according to the declassified documents I've managed to obtain through Freedom of Information Act requests, Project Apex wasn't the only program that lost containment. Mrs. Rivera calls me every few days asking if there's any new information about her daughter. I've never told her about the missing face, or the text messages, or what I really found in that clearing. How do you explain to a grieving mother that her daughter was consumed by something that's now wearing her memories like a favorite shirt? But last week, Mrs. Rivera told me something that made my blood freeze. She said she'd been getting calls from Ashley's number. Just breathing at first, then whispers. Then finally Ashley's voice saying she was okay, that she was part of something bigger now, something important. She sounds so peaceful, Mrs. Rivera said, like she's finally found what she was looking for. I've changed my phone number twice, but the text messages keep coming. Updates on its research, descriptions of its expanding network, invitations to join what it calls the next phase of human development. And sometimes late at night when I'm alone in my cabin, I wonder if the Henderson family incident 2 years ago wasn't my first encounter with this thing. I wonder if it's been studying me much longer than I realized. I wonder if I'm part of some larger experiment, a long-term psychological study on human behavior under supernatural stress. Because there's one detail I haven't told anyone, one piece of information that keeps me awake every night. Ashley Rivera's thesis research didn't start 2 months ago like her mother claimed. According to the timestamps on her computer files, she'd been researching Project Apex for over 2 years, ever since the Henderson family disappeared. Ever since something wearing their faces started calling me on the radio. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror and comment your theory about what really happened to Ashley Rivera. I read every single one. My name is Derek Mason, and I should have forgotten the case of Lauren Davis, but something brought me back to that cursed forest. It had been 4 months since the 22-year-old graduate student vanished from the Lamar Valley backcountry in Yellowstone. 4 months since I'd filed my final report stamped missing person case suspended and tried to convince myself I'd done everything possible. 4 months of my wife Sarah asking why I still woke up at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, whispering Lauren's name. The call came on October 15, 2018, while I was helping my 7-year-old daughter Emma with her science project about ecosystems. My iPhone buzzed against the kitchen table, an unknown number with a 307 area code. Ranger Mason? The voice was shaky, older. This is Dr. Eugene Davis, Lauren's father. My blood pressure spiked instantly. Emma looked up from her poster board, sensing the change in my demeanor. I stepped into the hallway, pressing the phone harder against my ear. Dr. Davis, They found something, he interrupted. At the university, Lauren's research notes, hidden in her lab locker behind false backing. His voice cracked. Mr. Mason, she was investigating dimensional anomalies in Yellowstone. She had coordinates, GPS readings that don't make sense. The phone felt suddenly heavy in my grip. My free hand involuntarily rubbed my wedding ring. The same nervous habit that had developed during those sleepless nights after Lauren's case went cold. Dr. Davis, the investigation was thorough. We searched a 12-mile radius from her last known position twice. Thermal imaging, search dogs, ground teams. The coordinates aren't in any of your search grids, he said. They're for locations that shouldn't exist according to geological surveys, but Lauren's equipment recorded them, multiple times. I leaned against the hallway wall, feeling the house's warmth against my back while a chill worked its way down my spine. Not the metaphorical kind, but actual cold that made my shoulder blades contract involuntarily. Sir, I understand your need for closure, but My daughter believed something was wrong with reality itself in that section of the park, he said. Something that started 3 years ago when that quantum research facility had their minor containment breach near Mammoth Hot Springs, the one they buried in classified reports. The words hit me like cold water. I remembered the incident, a Department of Energy laboratory conducting atmospheric research that suddenly went dark for 72 hours in 2015. Official reports claimed equipment malfunction, no injuries, nothing to see here. Dr. Davis. She was documenting temporal distortions, Mr. Mason. Her instruments recorded the same locations existing at different elevations on different days. GPS coordinates that place solid ground where satellite imagery shows empty air. His breathing became ragged. Please, just look at her notes. My wife can't take this uncertainty anymore. We need to know what happened to our little girl. I closed my eyes, seeing Emma's innocent face through the kitchen doorway, her small hands carefully gluing cotton balls onto her poster to represent clouds. The parallels weren't lost on me, Dr. Davis fighting for his daughter the same way I'd fight for mine. I'll review the materials, I heard myself saying, but I can't promise. That's all I ask. The university is overnighting everything to your station. After hanging up, I stood in that hallway for nearly 10 minutes, watching my own family through the doorway. Sarah was helping Emma write water cycle in purple marker. They looked so normal, so safe, so perfectly grounded in a reality that made sense. But Lauren Davis's case had never made sense. The package arrived at Tower Junction Ranger Station the next morning at 6:23 a.m., according to the FedEx tracking slip. I'd been there since 5:30, nursing black coffee and staring at my iPhone's weather app. Partly cloudy, 34 degrees, normal October conditions for Yellowstone. Inside the manila envelope were photocopies of Lauren's research notes, printed in her neat, precise handwriting. But as I spread them across my desk, my hands began trembling slightly. Not from caffeine, but from what I was reading. Lauren had been documenting impossible things. Her GPS unit recorded the same coordinates, 44 degree 5523, 7N, 110 degree 24 to 18.2 W, on 17 different occasions over 3 months. But according to her elevation readings, that location existed anywhere from 6,147 feet to 7,203 feet above sea level, sometimes changing by hundreds of feet between visits just hours apart. More disturbing were her temperature readings. The area around those coordinates registered consistent cold spots, drops of 15-20 degrees in perfect circles roughly 30 feet in diameter. Her digital thermometer showed readings that fluctuated wildly. 62 degrees outside the zone, 31 degrees inside, then 58 degrees 5 minutes later at the exact same spot. But the electromagnetic readings made my palms sweat despite the morning chill. Lauren's equipment detected massive magnetic field distortions every Tuesday and Thursday between 3:17 p.m. and 4:43 p.m. Compass needles spinning freely, GPS units displaying error messages or coordinates that placed the user in locations hundreds of miles away. The final entry, dated 3 days before her disappearance, was written in shaky handwriting. Something is fundamentally wrong with space-time in Grid Zone 7. Reality feels thin. Objects appear and disappear. Saw my own reflection in standing water that showed me from behind even though I was facing the water directly. Equipment recorded my voice having conversations I never had, in languages I don't speak. The air itself feels different here, heavier, like breathing through thick cloth. I think the dimensional barrier has been compromised. I think something is coming through. My throat went dry as sand. The coffee mug in my hand suddenly felt scalding hot, then ice cold, then normal again in the span of seconds. I checked the coordinates against our search grids from July. Dr. Davis was right. We'd never searched that specific location. According to our topographical maps and satellite imagery, those coordinates placed you in empty air 30 feet above a steep ravine. But Lauren's equipment insisted solid ground existed there. I called my supervisor, Chief Ranger Patricia Hendricks, at 7:45 a.m. Mason, the Davis case is closed. she said without preamble. "We've got budget constraints and active missing persons that need resources." "Chief, there's new evidence. The victim was documenting environmental anomalies that suggest..." "Environmental anomalies?" Her tone sharpened. "Derek, you've got a wife and kid. Don't go chasing ghosts because you feel guilty about one case going cold." The mention of my family hit deeper than intended. Sarah had been asking me to request a transfer to a less remote station, somewhere closer to good schools for Emma, somewhere that didn't require me to spend nights alone in wilderness that felt increasingly unfamiliar. "This isn't about guilt," I said, though we both knew it was partially a lie. "I have coordinates that weren't in our original search grid. If there's even a chance Lauren Davis is alive..." "She's not alive, Derek. Not after 4 months in backcountry winter conditions." Patricia's voice softened slightly. "Look, take a day. Check out these coordinates if it helps you sleep better. But make it unofficial. No search and rescue resources, no backup, no overtime hours." "Understood. And Derek? Be home for dinner. Your family needs you present, not obsessing over cases we can't solve." After hanging up, I sat in my office chair, staring at Lauren's research notes spread across my desk like evidence of something beyond my understanding. My iPhone showed 3 missed texts from Sarah. "Emma's school play is Thursday at 7 p.m. Don't forget to pick up milk on your way home. Love you, be safe out there." I screenshot the last message and made it my lock screen wallpaper. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Derek Mason's situation? Comment below. I left the station at 11:30 a.m., driving my Ranger Service Ford F-150 up the winding mountain road toward Lamar Valley. My gear bag contained the essentials: Garmin GPS unit, digital thermometer, compass, emergency radio, first aid kit, MREs for 2 days, and my service pistol, standard protocol for solo backcountry work. What wasn't standard was the growing sense that I was driving towards something that would fundamentally change my understanding of reality. The coordinates placed Lauren's Grid Zone 7 approximately 8 miles northeast of the Lamar River, accessible only by a forgotten mining road that hadn't appeared on park maps since the 1970s. According to Lauren's notes, she'd discovered the route by following elk tracks that led to what should have been impassable terrain. As I drove deeper into the backcountry, my truck's radio began experiencing interference. Classic country music became distorted, voices speaking backwards, stations that shouldn't exist broadcasting in what sounded like multiple languages simultaneously. I switched it off and continued in silence, but the silence felt wrong, too complete, as if the forest were holding its breath. My iPhone lost signal at mile marker 23, which was unusual but not unprecedented in remote areas. What was unprecedented was the way the screen flickered between no service and displaying full signal strength with carrier names I didn't recognize. Temporal flux, dimensional bridge, reality terminal. I pulled over and restarted the phone. Normal display returned, showing no service consistently. The mining road appeared exactly where Lauren's notes indicated, a barely visible dirt track that my GPS couldn't identify. As I turned onto it, my truck's digital clock reset itself to 12:00, flashing repeatedly as if struggling to determine the correct time. The temperature began dropping noticeably. My breath started fogging despite the dashboard thermometer reading 52° AOM. I cranked up the heater, but the warm air felt thin, insubstantial, like it wasn't entirely real. 3 miles down the mining road, I encountered the first impossibility. A massive ponderosa pine tree lay across the path, clearly fallen recently. The exposed wood was still pale yellow, sap bleeding from fresh breaks. But according to Lauren's notes from 2 weeks ago, this same tree blocked the road in the identical position. I parked and examined the trunk. Chainsaw cuts were visible in 3 places, indicating someone had cleared this road before, but the cuts looked wrong, too clean, edges that seemed to shift slightly when I wasn't looking directly at them. The sap felt ice cold against my fingertips and left no residue when I pulled my hand away. My digital thermometer read 31° in the immediate vicinity of the tree, while remaining 52° everywhere else. I squeezed through the gap between trunk and rock face, leaving my truck behind. From here, I'd continue on foot, The hike to Lauren's coordinates took 47 minutes according to my watch, though the sun's position suggested I'd been walking for at least 3 hours. The inconsistency made my stomach clench with anxiety that felt like physical illness. As I approached the target location, the forest began exhibiting behaviors I'd never witnessed in 18 years as a ranger. Bird calls came from empty sky. Shadows fell at wrong angles, creating cool spots where direct sunlight should have been warmest. My footsteps on dry leaves produced echoes that arrived seconds before the original sounds. The vegetation grew increasingly strange. Pine needles that felt like plastic when touched. Wildflowers blooming in perfect geometric patterns. Grass that grew in spirals, as if following invisible mathematics. At 44th degree I-20, 1N, 110 toward 24 I-15, 7W, approximately 400 yards from Lauren's target coordinates, I encountered the perimeter. It was invisible, but unmistakable. A perfect circle, roughly 30 feet in diameter, where reality felt compromised. The air shimmered occasionally, like heat waves rising from summer asphalt, except the temperature had dropped to 28 degrees according to my thermometer. My compass needle spun lazily, unable to find magnetic north. The GPS unit displayed error messages in multiple languages, then showed my position as being simultaneously in Yellowstone, the Mariana Trench, and something called Fold Space Coordinate System Delta 7. I tried calling dispatch on my emergency radio. Static answered, punctuated by voices speaking in reverse, fragments of conversations that sounded like my own voice discussing events I'd never experienced. Then I heard Lauren Davis. Hello? Can anyone hear me? This is Lauren Davis. I'm alive, but I don't know where I am. The ground keeps changing. The sky has too many moons. Please, if someone receives this, I'm at coordinates. The coordinates keep changing. Sometimes I'm underground, sometimes I'm floating. Please help me. My father's name is Eugene Davis. Tell him I'm trying to come home. The transmission was crystal clear despite the static. But Lauren's voice had an odd quality. It echoed slightly, as if speaking from inside a vast, hollow space. Lauren, this is Ranger Derek Mason. Can you hear me? What's your current status? No response, just static. I tried again. Lauren Davis, this is Derek Mason with Yellowstone National Park Service. I'm at your research coordinates. If you can hear this, please respond. Silence. Then Lauren's voice again, but saying different words. The portal opens at sunset. Don't let them see you when it opens. They're not from here. They wear faces, but the faces don't fit right. Hide until morning. The math is wrong here. Time goes sideways. The transmission cut to static. My hands were shaking as I attempted to respond, but no matter what I said into the radio, only silence came back. I approached the perimeter's edge with scientific caution, extending my thermometer ahead of me. The temperature dropped incrementally with each step. 28 degrees Celsius, 26 degrees Celsius, 23 degrees Celsius, 19 degrees Celsius. At exactly 30 feet from the center point, my thermometer stopped working. The digital display showed impossible readings. 400 degrees, then 2,147 degrees, then error symbols that weren't in any manual. I withdrew the device. Normal function returned immediately. My iPhone, despite showing no signal, was recording video automatically. When I checked the footage, it showed empty forest. No sign of the shimmering air distortions I could clearly see. But audio captured sounds I hadn't heard. Whispers in unknown languages, mechanical humming, and what sounded like massive objects moving through thick liquid. The wrongness became overwhelming. Every survival instinct screamed at me to retreat, but Lauren Davis was somewhere beyond that boundary. A daughter who wanted to come home to parents who loved her, just like Emma would want to come home to Sarah and me. I thought of Dr. Davis's broken voice on the phone. I thought of my own daughter's trust that Daddy could fix anything. I thought of my wedding vows to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. I stepped across the perimeter. Reality immediately became negotiable. The ground beneath my boots felt solid but looked like flowing water. Gravity pulled in multiple directions simultaneously, creating a sensation of falling while remaining upright. Colors existed that I had no names for. Not just new shades of familiar colors, but entirely new categories of light that my eyes shouldn't have been able to process. The trees ahead looked normal from my peripheral vision but revealed themselves as geometric impossibilities when viewed directly. Branches that grew through their own trunks, leaves that existed in more than 3 dimensions, bark patterns that hurt to focus on because they contained too much detail for human comprehension. My watch stopped working, but time didn't stop. It became fluid. I experienced the next few minutes as simultaneous past, present, and future. I was walking forward while walking backward while standing still. I was young Derek Mason from my academy graduation while being middle-aged, Derek Mason with aching knees while being elderly, Derek Mason I'd never become. The sensation was nauseating beyond description. My stomach rebelled against existing in multiple temporal states simultaneously. I dry heaved, but the sound came out as musical notes that took physical form and floated away as glowing orbs. Through the dimensional distortion, I saw the source of the anomaly. 50 yards ahead, suspended 3 feet above ground level, hung a perfect sphere of absolute darkness approximately 6 feet in diameter. Not black like absence of light, but dark like absence of existence itself. Reality bent around it like fabric stretched over a bowling ball, creating visual distortions that made my eyes water. The sphere pulsed irregularly, each pulse sending ripples through space-time that I could feel in my bones. With each pulse, the boundaries between dimensions became more permeable. And standing directly beneath it, looking up with wonder rather than terror, was Lauren Davis. She appeared exactly as she had in the missing person photos. 22 years old, brown hair and a practical ponytail, wearing the same blue hiking jacket and khaki pants she'd worn the day she disappeared. But something was fundamentally wrong with her presence. She cast no shadow despite the dimensional rift above casting impossible shadows in every direction. Her breathing created no fog, despite the sub-freezing temperature. When she moved, her footsteps left no prints in ground that clearly showed my own boot treads. "Lauren," I called out. She turned toward me and I saw her face clearly for the first time. It was Lauren Davis, unmistakably. But her eyes held knowledge that no human should possess. They reflected not the forest around us, but vast spaces filled with geometries that defied 3-dimensional physics. When she smiled, I glimpsed teeth that were the correct number and shape, but seemed to be made of crystallized time. "Ranger Mason," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested she was speaking from multiple locations simultaneously. "You came looking for me. Lauren, we need to get you out of here. Your parents are worried sick. There are people who love you and need you to come home." She tilted her head like a curious child. "Home? But this is where I belong now. This is where the math makes sense. Do you want to see?" Before I could respond, she gestured toward the sphere above us. The darkness pulsed brighter, a contradiction that somehow made perfect sense within the distorted space. Images began appearing in its surface like a cosmic television screen, showing channels from other realities. I saw Yellowstone National Park as it existed in dimensions where humans never evolved. Vast crystal forests, where each tree sang in mathematical harmonies. I saw versions of Earth where gravity flowed upward and rivers ran through sky. Realities where time moved in spirals instead of straight lines, where cause and effect were suggestions rather than laws. And I saw creatures, beings that moved through space by folding distance rather than traveling across it. Entities made of living mathematics that communicated through reality-altering equations. Things that existed in more dimensions than human consciousness could process, so they appeared to us as fragmentary glimpses of impossible anatomy. Too many eyes, limbs that bent in directions that didn't exist, voices that spoke in colors. "They're not hostile," Lauren said, noticing my terror. "They're just different. They think in ways we can't imagine, but they're curious about us, about our linear existence, our simple 3-dimensional perspective." One of the entities began emerging from the sphere. It appeared first as a shifting geometric pattern, like a living kaleidoscope made of obsidian and starlight. As it pushed through the dimensional barrier, reality scrambled to accommodate its presence. The ground beneath us rippled like water. Gravity fluctuated, making my stomach lurch as my body weight fluctuated between normal and weightless. The creature's form stabilized into something almost recognizable. Humanoid in basic structure but wrong in every detail. Too tall, joints bending in additional directions, skin that reflected inner light like black water. Its face held features that were almost human but arranged according to alien aesthetics. When it spoke, the words bypassed my ears and appeared directly in my consciousness. "We have been studying your species through the breach. You are fascinating, so fragmented, so linear. Each of you exists in only one reality at a time. How do you function with such limited perspective?" My mouth moved without conscious control. We don't know any different. This is all we've ever experienced. The young female has been helping us understand. She volunteered to serve as liaison between our mathematics and your biology. The process has enhanced her comprehension significantly. I looked at Lauren, understanding flooding through me with sick realization. "What did they do to you?" "They didn't do anything to me," she corrected gently. "They offered me an opportunity to experience reality as it truly exists, to see beyond the illusion of 3 dimensions and linear time, to understand the universe as pure mathematics rather than crude matter. Lauren, that's not living, that's not human. Your parents need their daughter, not some enhanced version." Her expression shifted, and for a moment I saw the real Lauren Davis, frightened, confused, desperately homesick. But the moment passed, replaced by the eerily calm demeanor of someone who'd seen too much cosmic truth. "I can't go back," she said. "I've been changed at the quantum level. My consciousness exists partially in their dimension now. If I tried to return completely to your reality, the dimensional stress would tear me apart at the molecular level," the entity's voice returned. "But we can offer you the same gift, Derek Mason. Your neural patterns show exceptional adaptability. You could join her in true existence. See your family from every possible angle simultaneously. Love them across all timelines at once." The offer struck me with unexpected temptation, to exist beyond human limitations, to protect Emma and Sarah not just in this reality, but in every possible version of reality. To be more than just Derek Mason, forest ranger, limited by 3 dimensions and linear time. But then I thought of Emma's school play on Thursday. The simple joy in her eyes when she glued cotton balls to poster board. Sarah's morning ritual of making coffee exactly the way I liked it. Not because she had to, but because small acts of love were what made life worth living. These creatures could offer me cosmic perspective, but they couldn't offer me Tuesday evening dinners with my family or reading bedtime stories to my daughter, or the warm weight of my wife's hand in mine during movies. They could give me universal knowledge, but not human love. "No," I said aloud. "I choose to remain limited. I choose to stay human." The entity's response carried what I interpreted as disappointment. "As you wish. But the breach continues to expand. Others will make different choices. Your species' contact with higher mathematics is inevitable." "Lauren," I said urgently, "if you can't come back completely, can you at least send a message to your parents? Let them know you're alive, that you made a choice, that it wasn't just random tragedy." She considered this with an expression that flickered between human daughter and cosmic entity. "Yes," she said finally. "I can do that much." She closed her eyes and spoke in her normal voice. No dimensional harmonics, no alien knowledge, just a young woman who missed her family. "Tell my parents I love them. Tell them I'm safe, just different now. Tell them I'm exploring the most beautiful mathematics they could imagine, and someday when they're ready, maybe we can see each other again. Tell my mom I still remember the lullaby she used to sing. Tell my dad his little girl is still curious about everything, just on a much bigger scale now." Tears ran down my cheeks. In 18 years of ranger service, I'd delivered news of death, injury, and loss. But I'd never had to tell parents their daughter had voluntarily transcended human existence. The entity began withdrawing back into the sphere. "The portal will remain active for 17 more of your minutes. After that, it closes for 6 months while we recalibrate the dimensional mathematics. If you change your mind about transcendence, this is your opportunity." As the creature disappeared, reality began reasserting normal physics. Gravity stabilized, colors returned to familiar spectrums, time resumed linear progression. The sphere pulsed once more, then began contracting. Lauren looked at me with an expression of profound sadness and infinite wisdom. "Thank you for coming to find me," she said. "Thank you for caring enough to never give up. I wish I could bring you home." "You are bringing me home," she said, smiling genuinely for the first time. "You're taking my love back to the people who need to hear it. That's the most important rescue you could perform." The sphere contracted to half its original size. The dimensional distortions around us began fading. "Go," Lauren said, "before you get trapped between realities. Your family needs you whole." I turned and ran. The journey back to my truck felt like fleeing a cosmic crime scene. With each step away from the portal's influence, reality became more solid, more familiar, more comfortably limited. Colors lost their impossible hues. Gravity pulled consistently downward. Time moved forward at a comprehensible pace. By the time I reached the fallen ponderosa pine, my equipment was functioning normally. GPS showed accurate coordinates. Thermometer read 47°O. Compass pointed to magnetic north. My iPhone displayed normal carrier signal and the correct time, 4:23 p.m. I'd been inside the dimensional anomaly for 6 hours, though it felt simultaneously like minutes and eternity. The drive back to Tower Junction passed without incident. No radio interference, no temporal distortions, no impossible phenomena. Just ordinary October afternoon in Yellowstone National Park, beautiful and normal and three-dimensional, but I carried with me knowledge that would forever change how I perceived reality. Every shadow now might hide entrances to other dimensions. Every strange sound might be whispers from beings who thought in mathematics we couldn't comprehend. Every moment of unexplained electronics malfunction might be evidence of expanding dimensional breaches. I arrived home at 6:47 p.m., 13 minutes before Sarah expected me for dinner. Emma ran to greet me at the door, wrapping small arms around my waist with the unconscious trust that Daddy would always come home safe. Sarah smiled from the kitchen doorway, holding a wooden spoon and wearing the blue apron Emma had given her for Mother's Day. "How was your day?" Sarah asked. I looked at my wife, her familiar face, her ordinary human beauty, her wonderfully limited three-dimensional existence, and felt love so profound, it ached. "It was complicated," I said, "but I'm home now." During dinner, Emma chatted about her day at school, about her upcoming play, about whether we could get a puppy for Christmas. Normal concerns from a normal 7-year-old living in a normal reality where puppies and school plays were the most important things in the universe. I listened to every word with the attention of someone who'd seen realities where such simple joys couldn't exist. That night, after Emma was asleep and Sarah was reading in bed, I sat at my home office and wrote my final report on the Lauren Davis case. Missing person Lauren Davis contacted via emergency radio at coordinates 44°55, 23.7 N, 110°2418.2 on October 16, 2018. Subject confirmed alive but unable to return due to voluntary participation in ongoing scientific research in remote location. Subject requested family be informed of her well-being and continued love. Case closed. Missing person located and confirmed safe by choice. No further action required. I sealed the report and Lauren's research notes in an envelope marked "Classified, Supervisor Eyes Only," and locked it in my desk drawer. Some truths were too dangerous to share. Some mysteries were meant to protect people rather than enlighten them. Some cases should remain officially closed while remaining personally eternal. The next morning, I called Dr. Eugene Davis. "Mr. Davis, this is Ranger Derek Mason. I have an update on your daughter." Silence, then, Did you find her?" "Yes, sir. I found her. She's alive." The sound he made was part sob, part prayer of gratitude. "She asked me to give you a message," I continued. "She said to tell you and your wife that she loves you both very much. She's safe, just involved in research that's taken her to a place where she can't easily return. She said to tell your wife she still remembers the lullaby. and to tell you that your little girl is still curious about everything, just on a much bigger scale now. When can we see her? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of necessary deception. The research project has strict communication protocols, but she wanted you to know she's pursuing the most beautiful mathematics you could imagine, and that someday, when the time is right, you might be able to see each other again. It wasn't technically a lie. Every word Lauren had said was true, just filtered through carefully chosen language that protected Dr. and Mrs. Davis from truths that would shatter their understanding of reality itself. "Thank you," Dr. Davis whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on her. Thank you for bringing us peace." After hanging up, I walked outside and stood in my backyard, looking up at the ordinary October sky. Somewhere beyond the visible stars, entities made of living mathematics were studying humanity through dimensional rifts we'd accidentally created. Somewhere in spaces that existed between our reality and theirs, a young woman named Lauren Davis was learning to think in ways human brains weren't designed to comprehend. But here, in this carefully limited three-dimensional existence, my wife was making coffee and my daughter was getting ready for school. And the most important mathematics in my universe were the simple equations that made our small family work. I chose the limitation. I chose the boundaries. I chose love over cosmic understanding. And as I walked back inside to help Emma find her missing homework folder, I realized that might be the most human choice of all. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror and comment your theory about what really happened to Lauren Davis. I read every single one. Some doors should never be opened. Some mathematics should never be solved. Some missing persons cases reveal truths too dangerous for human comprehension. But love, simple, limited, three-dimensional human love, remains the most powerful force in any reality. My name is Samantha Brooks, and the voice breaking on the other end of my iPhone that October morning in 2018 still haunts me. I'd been a ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for exactly 4 months and 12 days when Patricia Buchanan called me directly, bypassing the official channels that had already failed her son. "Please," her voice cracked through the speaker as I sat in my Ford Ranger outside the visitor center, steam rising from my travel mug of gas station coffee. "Everyone else has given up looking for Ryan. The Park Service said they've done all they can, but I know my boy is still out there. I should have transferred her to my supervisor. Protocol dictated that civilian contact went through dispatch, not directly to Rangers. But something in her desperation grabbed hold of my chest like a cold fist. Maybe it was because I was still new enough to believe I could save everyone, or maybe it was the way she said his name. Like it was a prayer. "Ma'am, when did Ryan go missing?" I fumbled for my notepad, the spiral binding catching on my jacket zipper. 6 days ago, he was camping at Elkmont, Site 47. They found his tent, his car, everything exactly like he'd just stepped away for a minute. But he never came back. Her breathing became shallow and rapid. The other Rangers, they think he just wandered off, got lost. But Ryan knows these woods better than anyone. He's been coming here since he was 7 years old. The coffee in my mouth turned bitter as metallic penny taste flooded my saliva. Elkmont Campground had been giving me an uneasy feeling since my first week. Nothing I could explain to Ranger Martinez or the others, just a wrongness that made my skin feel too tight whenever I patrolled that section. "Mrs. Buchanan, the search teams have been thorough. We've covered. They missed something." Her voice dropped to an urgent whisper. "Ryan was researching something before he left. Some old stories about the park, about people who used to gather in the woods. He said he'd found evidence that they never really left." My pen stopped moving across the notepad. The hair on my forearm stood up despite the warm October sun streaming through my windshield. "What kind of people?" Static crackled through the phone connection, though my signal showed full bars. When Patricia's voice returned, it sounded distant, like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. "The kind that take people, Ranger Brooks. The kind that were supposed to be gone." The call ended abruptly. I stared at my phone screen. The display showed the call had lasted 8 minutes and 37 seconds, but somehow it felt like hours had passed. My radio crackled to life. Unit 23, what's your 20? Dispatcher Helen's voice cut through the morning air. I keyed the mic. Elkmont area, about to begin routine patrol. Copy that, 23. Be advised, we've had reports of campers hearing strange noises near Site 47 last night. Probably just wildlife, but keep your eyes open. Site 47. Ryan Buchanan's last known location. My hands trembled slightly as I turned the key in the ignition. Not the dramatic shaking of movie fear, but a fine tremor like I'd had too much caffeine. Sweat began forming instantly on my forehead despite the cool morning air. The drive to Elkmont took 23 minutes on the winding park roads. I'd driven this route dozens of times, but today the familiar curves felt wrong. Trees seemed to lean closer to the asphalt. Shadows fell at impossible angles that made my eyes water when I tried to follow them. I parked at the campground entrance and grabbed my gear: radio, GPS unit, first aid kit, emergency flares, and my grandfather's old compass. A gift from my mom when I'd gotten the ranger job. Trust your instincts, but verify with tools, she'd said. Smart advice from a woman who'd raised 3 kids in the mountains of North Carolina. Site 47 sat at the far end of the campground, backing up against the tree line where civilization met wilderness. Yellow caution tape still fluttered from the trees, remnants of the crime scene perimeter. The campsite looked exactly as dispatch had described. Tent stakes still in the ground, fire ring with cold ashes, camp chair positioned facing the woods like Ryan had been sitting there, watching something. I pulled out my phone to take photos. Standard procedure for any incident follow-up. The camera app opened normally, but when I raised the phone to capture the campsite, the screen went black. Not dead battery black, but an active, shifting darkness that seemed to move behind the glass. I pressed the home button repeatedly, but the phone remained unresponsive. What the hell? I muttered, trying the power button. Nothing. That's when I noticed the silence. Complete, total silence. No bird calls, no insect buzz, no wind through the leaves. Even my own breathing seemed muffled, like I was wearing earplugs. I'd been in quiet forests before, but this was different. This was the absence of life itself. My radio crackled with static. I adjusted the frequency dial, but the static only grew louder, more aggressive. Through the white noise, I could almost make out voices, whispered words in a language I didn't recognize. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in 30 seconds. My breath came out in visible puffs and the sweat on my forehead turned cold and clammy. Goosebumps erupted across my arms as I zipped up my jacket with fingers that had gone numb. I needed to call this in, report the equipment malfunctions. But as I reached for my radio, something caught my eye in the tree line behind the campsite. Movement. Human-shaped, but wrong somehow. I grabbed my binoculars and focused on the spot. Through the lenses, I could see a figure in dark clothing standing motionless between 2 oak trees. The figure was too far away to make out features, but something about its posture made my stomach clench with sudden nausea. The figure raised one arm in what might have been a wave. Then it stepped backward into the tree trunk and disappeared. I lowered the binoculars with hands that had developed that fine tremor again. When I looked with naked eyes, there was nothing there. Just trees and shadows and the growing certainty that something was very, very wrong at Elkmont. My GPS unit chose that moment to emit a series of rapid beeps. The screen showed my location as a series of question marks, with coordinates that placed me somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The device cycled through impossible locations. Antarctica, the International Space Station, coordinates that didn't exist on Earth. This is Unit 23. I said into my radio, fighting to keep my voice steady. I'm experiencing equipment malfunctions at Elkmont. GPS is down, phone is down, requesting backup for... The static cut me off, but this time I could definitely hear voices underneath the interference. Multiple voices speaking in unison, chanting something that made my molars ache just listening to it. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the campground and tree line. Empty, deserted. But the feeling of being watched crawled across my skin like insects. Every shadow seemed too deep, every tree trunk too wide, like they were hiding things that shouldn't be there. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Sam's situation? Comment below. That's when I found Ryan's journal. It was wedged behind a fallen log about 50 feet from his campsite. Leather binding, weather-stained, but pages still readable. The final entry was dated 6 days ago, the day he disappeared. October 15th, 2018, Day 3 at Elkmont. Found more evidence today. The old foundations aren't random cabin ruins like the Park Service claims. They're arranged in a specific pattern, a perfect pentagram with the center point located exactly where Site 47 sits now. Did some research on my phone before the signal cut out. This area was home to a religious sect in the 1920s called the Crimson Dawn. Local newspapers called them devil worshippers, said they performed human sacrifices during the full moon. The really fucked up part? They all supposedly died in a fire in 1928. But I found fresh offerings at 3 of the foundation sites. Flowers that couldn't have been dead for more than a day or two. Someone's been continuing their work. Going to check the center point tonight. If I'm right about the pattern, there should be something there. Something they built too. The entry ended mid-sentence like Ryan had been interrupted. I flipped through the earlier pages. Maps drawn in Ryan's careful handwriting, sketches of stone foundations, photographs taped to pages showing symbols carved into trees. The symbols looked like a mixture of Christian crosses and something much older, something that hurt to look at directly. On the very first page, Ryan had written a phone number with a note. Patricia Buchanan, Mom, call if anything happens. The same number that had called me this morning. My skin prickled with the realization that Ryan had been expecting trouble. He'd come here knowing it was dangerous, knowing something might happen to him. The question was, what had he discovered that was worth risking his life for? A branch snapped somewhere behind me. I spun around, journal clutched against my chest. The campground remained empty, but now I could see movement in my peripheral vision, shapes flitting between trees, always just out of direct sight. When I turned my head to look, they vanished. My radio erupted with static so loud it made me jump, but underneath the interference I could hear something that made my blood freeze in my veins. Ryan's voice. Sam. Brooks. The words were distorted, stretched like audio tape played at the wrong speed. Help. Me. I keyed the mic with trembling fingers. Ryan? Ryan, where are you? This is Ranger Brooks. I'm at your campsite. Can you see me? More static then. Can't leave. They won't let me. The signal died completely. I grabbed my emergency flare gun and hiking pack, shoving Ryan's journal inside. Whatever was happening here, I wasn't going to find answers standing in an empty campground. The journal mentioned foundation sites arranged in a pentagram pattern. If Ryan was right about the center point being at Site 47, then I needed to find the other 4 points. The first foundation site was 3/4 of a mile northeast, according to Ryan's map. I set off through the forest, using my grandfather's compass since the GPS was still showing impossible coordinates. The needle pointed north steady and true, the only piece of technology still functioning normally. The temperature continued dropping as I hiked. By the time I found the first foundation, my breath was visible and my fingers were going numb despite my gloves. The ruins consisted of 4 stone walls about 3 feet high, forming a rectangle roughly 10 by 12 feet. Probably a cabin foundation, just like the Park Service claimed. Except for the symbols. They were carved into every stone, covering the entire surface of the walls. Up close, they were even more disturbing than in Ryan's photographs. The crosses were inverted and twisted, intertwined with what looked like writhing snakes or tentacles. Some symbols seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them, shifting and rearranging themselves in my peripheral vision. And there were the offerings Ryan had mentioned. Fresh flowers, lilies and roses, arranged in small piles around the foundation. But as I got closer, I realized they weren't flowers at all. They were fingers. Human fingers cut cleanly at the knuckles and arranged like flower petals. Some still had nail polish, pink, blue, black, the kind of colors a young person might wear. My stomach lurched and I staggered backward. The taste of copper filled my mouth as nausea washed over me in waves. I fumbled for my radio. "This is Unit 23. I need immediate backup at coordinates." I looked down at my GPS, still showing question marks. "I'm northeast of Elkmont, approximately 1 mile. I've found evidence of human remains. Possible homicide." Static answered me, but this time the voices underneath were clearer. Multiple people speaking in unison, words in that unknown language that made my teeth ache. And underneath it all, Ryan's voice. "Sam, don't trust anyone." The radio went completely dead. No static, no sound at all. The LED display flickered and went dark. I was completely cut off. The smart thing would have been to hike back to my vehicle, drive to the nearest cell tower and call for backup. But Ryan's voice on the radio kept echoing in my head. If he was alive, if he was being held somewhere, then every minute I spent hiking out might be another minute closer to losing him forever. I pulled out the journal and studied Ryan's map. 4 more Foundation sites to check, arranged in a perfect pentagon around Site 47. If this really was some kind of ritual pattern, then the center point, the campsite where Ryan had been staying, was the most important location. The second Foundation site was 2 miles southeast. I started hiking, using deer trails and game paths to move through the forest as quietly as possible. The feeling of being watched grew stronger with every step. Shadows moved independently of their casting objects. Trees creaked without wind. And always, just at the edge of hearing, that chanting. Halfway to the second site, I found the first body. It was hanging from a tree branch about 20 feet off the ground, secured with climbing rope that looked new and expensive. The corpse was too decomposed to identify, but the clothing looked modern. Jeans, hiking boots, a fleece jacket. Could have been anyone who'd gone missing in the park over the past few months. But it was the position that made my skin crawl. The body was arranged with arms spread wide and head tilted back, like some twisted parody of a crucifixion. And carved into the tree bark above it was the same symbol I'd seen at the Foundation, an inverted cross wrapped in serpentine curves. I took photos with my grandfather's old film camera from my pack, the only piece of technology the strange interference hadn't affected. The mechanical click of the shutter was unnaturally loud in the silence. That's when I heard the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving through the forest behind me. I crouched behind a fallen log and listened. The footsteps weren't trying to be quiet. They wanted me to know they were there. Through gaps in the underbrush, I caught glimpses of dark robes, multiple figures moving in single file along the game trail I'd been following. Their faces were hidden by hoods, but their movements were coordinated in a way that suggested they'd done this before. Many times before. I counted at least 6 figures before they passed out of sight, heading toward the second Foundation site. The same direction I'd been traveling. My options were limited. I could try to circle around them, but that would add hours to my hike and might put me in an even worse position. I could try to follow them, but that seemed like a good way to end up hanging from a tree myself. Or I could go back to Site 47 and try to figure out what they were planning. The decision was made for me when my grandfather's compass needle suddenly swung 90 degrees and pointed directly at the center of the Pentagon, Site 47. The needle held steady despite my movement, like it was being pulled by a powerful magnet. Something was calling me home. The hike back took 47 minutes of careful movement through dense forest. I approached Site 47 from the north, staying hidden in the tree line. What I saw there made my bladder clench with sudden, urgent pressure. The campsite had been transformed. Candles, hundreds of them, were arranged in concentric circles around Ryan's abandoned tent. The flames burned without flickering despite the breeze, casting steady light that seemed to absorb more darkness than it dispelled. In the center of the circles, a figure knelt with arms bound behind their back. Ryan. He was alive, conscious, and clearly terrified. Even from a distance, I could see him straining against the ropes. His mouth was covered with duct tape, but his eyes darted frantically as he searched the tree line. The robed figures I'd seen earlier were positioned around the outer edge of the candle circles. They stood motionless as statues, heads bowed, hands clasped in front of them, waiting. But waiting for what? I checked my watch. 6:47 p.m. The sun was setting, and the first stars were becoming visible through the canopy. As darkness fell, the chanting began again. Low, rhythmic, hypnotic. The sound seemed to come from the earth itself rather than from the robed figures. I had to do something. Call for backup, create a distraction, something. But my radio was dead, my phone was dead, and I was one person against at least 6 cultists. Plus, however many more might be hidden in the forest. That's when I remembered the emergency flares in my pack. Flares weren't weapons exactly, but they burned at nearly 2,000 degrees and could be seen for miles. If I could create enough chaos, maybe I could free Ryan and get him to safety. Or at least give him a chance to run. I circled around to the east side of the campsite, staying low and moving as quietly as possible. The chanting grew louder as I got closer, and I could finally make out individual words. Crimson dawn rises. Blood feeds the earth. The old ways return. Over and over, like a prayer or incantation, the robed figures had begun swaying in unison, a hypnotic movement that made my eyes water when I tried to focus on it. I was 30 feet from the nearest candle circle when one of the figures turned and looked directly at me. The face under the hood wasn't human. It had the basic structure, eyes, nose, mouth, but everything was wrong. The skin was gray-white like old paper, the eyes were completely black, and the mouth was full of teeth that were too sharp and too numerous. When it smiled at me, I counted at least 3 rows of fangs. "Welcome, Ranger Brooks," it said in a voice like grinding glass. "We've been waiting for you." All 6 figures turned toward me in perfect synchronization. Under their hoods, they all had the same inhuman face, the same black eyes, the same predatory smile. "You shouldn't have come alone," another one said, "but we're grateful. Fresh blood strengthens the ritual." I fumbled for the flare gun with hands that had gone completely numb. My breathing came in short, sharp gasps that misted in the frigid air. Sweat poured down my face despite the cold, and my vision tunneled until I could only see the creatures standing between me and Ryan. "What are you?" I managed to whisper. "We are the Crimson Dawn," they spoke in unison, their voices creating an impossible harmony. "We are the servants of what sleeps beneath. We are the gardeners of the new world." The thing that had spoken first stepped closer, moving with fluid grace that ignored the normal mechanics of walking. "Your friend Ryan thought he could expose us, thought the world needed to know our secrets. But some knowledge is too dangerous for the unworthy." "Let him go," I said, raising the flare gun. "He's just a kid. He doesn't know anything." "He knows everything," another creature hissed. "He found our sacred sites. He photographed our holy symbols. He even discovered the truth about the fire of 1928. "What truth?" The creatures exchanged glances and their smiles grew wider. "There was no fire, Ranger Brooks. We simply moved, went underground, waited for the right time to resurface. And now, with the stars in proper alignment and the earth hungry for sacrifice, the time has come." One of them gestured toward Ryan, who was struggling more frantically against his bonds. "Your friend will help us open the door. His blood, freely given through fear and pain, will wake what has slept for 90 years. "And my blood?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Your blood will help us spread. One ranger's disappearance might be explained. But two will bring investigators, federal agents, more fresh blood for the harvest." I had to act now, before they realized I understood their plan. The flare gun held only one shot, but it might be enough to create chaos. I aimed at the nearest cluster of candles and pulled the trigger. The flare streaked across the campsite like a comet, trailing red light and sparks. It hit the candles and exploded in a shower of burning phosphorus, instantly igniting everything within a 10-foot radius. The robed creatures shrieked in unison, a sound like metal tearing, and scattered. I sprinted toward Ryan, pulling out my knife to cut his bonds. But as I reached the edge of the candle circles, something hit me from behind with the force of a freight train. I went down hard, face first into the dirt. Pain exploded through my left shoulder as claws raked across my jacket, shredding the fabric and the skin underneath. I rolled over to see one of the creatures standing over me, its hands extended into talons that dripped with my blood. "Foolish child," it snarled. "You cannot stop what has already begun." The other creatures were reorganizing, moving to surround me. The scattered candles had been replaced instantly, appearing from nowhere like they'd never been disturbed. The fire from my flare was already dying out, contained by some supernatural force. But Ryan was looking at me with something like hope in his eyes. He'd managed to work one hand partially free from his bonds. I still had 3 more flares in my pack. I rolled sideways, avoiding another swipe from the creature's claws, and came up running. Not toward the forest this time, but toward the center of the campsite. Toward Ryan and whatever supernatural focal point the creatures had built there. "Stop her!" the creatures screamed in their glass-grinding voices. "She must not reach the center." I dove forward, grabbing Ryan around the waist and rolling both of us away from the center point, just as something erupted from the ground where he'd been kneeling. Something huge. Something that had been sleeping under the earth for 90 years. It rose from the soil like a twisted tree, all writhing tentacles and snapping mouths and eyes that burned with their own malevolent light. The thing was easily 20 feet tall, and its presence filled the air with a stench like rotting meat and sulfur. "The Great Sleeper wakes," the creatures chanted ecstatically. "The door is open. The new world begins." I cut Ryan's remaining bonds with shaking hands while the thing continued emerging from the earth. Its tentacles lashed out, grabbing 2 of the robed creatures and pulling them into one of its many mouths. The creatures didn't scream. They laughed with joy as they were consumed. "We have to run," Ryan gasped, ripping the tape from his mouth. "They've been feeding people to that thing for months. It gets stronger with every sacrifice." "Can we kill it?" I asked, helping him to his feet. "I don't think so, but maybe we can collapse the cave system underneath." I found old mining charges in one of the Foundation sites. The Great Sleeper had fully emerged now, a nightmare fusion of octopus and spider and something even worse. It towered over the campsite, tentacles reaching out to grab anything that moved. The remaining creatures danced around its base, offering themselves as willing prey. But the thing wasn't interested in them anymore. Its burning eyes had fixed on Ryan and me. "It wants us specifically," Ryan said. "Fresh fear, new blood. The cultists have been feeding it animals and homeless people, but it needs something special to complete the ritual." A tentacle lashed out toward us. I shoved Ryan aside and fired another flare directly at the creature's center mass. The phosphorus stuck to its hide and burned, but the thing barely seemed to notice. If anything, the fire only made it angrier. "The mining charges," I said. "Where are they?" "Foundation Site 3. Southeast about a mile. But we'll never make it there with this thing hunting us." Another tentacle whipped through the air where we'd been standing. We ran for the tree line, the Great Sleeper's roars echoing behind us like a freight train full of broken glass. The forest was a maze of shadows and grabbing branches. We ran without flashlights, guided only by starlight and the distant glow of burning candles. Behind us, the creature crashed through the trees, tentacles uprooting entire oaks as it gave chase. "This way," Ryan gasped, veering left toward a game trail. I marked the route to the Foundation sites. We ran for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. The creature stayed close behind us, but something about the forest seemed to slow it down. Maybe it was connected to the ritual site. Maybe distance weakened it. Or maybe it was just playing with us. Foundation Site 3 looked exactly like the others. 4 stone walls covered in twisted symbols. But Ryan led me to a depression in the center where someone had buried a metal box wrapped in oiled canvas. Inside, 6 sticks of dynamite, blasting caps, and a timer that looked like it belonged in a 1940s movie. Everything was old, but well preserved. "How do you know about explosives?" I asked. "My dad was a demolition expert in the Army. Taught me about ordnance when I was a kid." Ryan's hands were steady as he assembled the charges. "This should be enough to bring down the cave system under the campsite. Without the focal point, the creature should go back to sleep." "Should?" "Well, the alternative is that it stays awake and starts hunting people throughout the entire park." A roar echoed through the forest, closer than before. The Great Sleeper had found our trail. "How long do we have?" I asked. "Timer's set for 10 minutes. We need to get this back to the campsite and find somewhere safe to wait for the explosion." We ran back through the forest, Ryan carrying the improvised bomb in his backpack. The creature's roars grew louder as we approached Site 47, but we couldn't see it through the trees. When we reached the edge of the campsite, I understood why. The Great Sleeper had burrowed back underground, leaving only the tip of its bulk visible above the earth. The remaining cultists were arranged around it in a circle, chanting frantically as they fed it their own blood from shallow cuts on their arms. "They're trying to anchor it," Ryan whispered. "Make it permanent so it can't be forced back to sleep." "How long until they succeed?" "Minutes, maybe less." We crept forward using the scattered camping equipment as cover. Ryan needed to get close enough to the center point to ensure the charges would collapse the entire cave system. That's when I realized the flaw in our plan. 10 minutes, I said. The timer's set for 10 minutes. We can't get far enough away in 10 minutes, not with that thing hunting us. Ryan's face went pale in the candlelight. I know. There has to be another way. There is. He looked at me with eyes that held too much resignation for someone his age. Someone has to stay behind, make sure the charges detonate at exactly the right spot. Manual detonation. No. The word came out harder than I'd intended. I'm not letting a 22-year-old kid sacrifice himself. There has to be... The chanting stopped. All 6 remaining cultists turned to look directly at our hiding spot behind Ryan's overturned camp table. Their black eyes reflected the candlelight like mirrors. "Run," Ryan said. We ran. The cultists moved faster than anything human should be able to move, flowing across the campsite like liquid shadow. The Great Sleeper erupted from the ground again, tentacles reaching out to block our escape routes. I fired my last 2 flares, one at the cultists and one at the creature's eyes. The phosphorus bought us maybe 30 seconds, enough time to reach the opposite side of the campsite, but we were trapped now. Forest on 3 sides, the creature and its servants on the 4th, and the bomb in Ryan's backpack had less than 8 minutes left on the timer. "Give me the charges," I said. "What?" "I'm the ranger. This is my responsibility. These are my woods, my people to protect." I held out my hand. "Give me the bomb." "Sam, no. I got us into this mess. I should... You're 22 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you." I grabbed the backpack from his shoulders. I knew this job was dangerous when I took it. I knew there might come a day when I'd have to put my life on the line for someone else. A tentacle slammed into the tree next to us, showering us with splinters. The creature was getting closer. "Besides," I said, adjusting the backpack straps, "I'm the one with the badge. That means something." Ryan's eyes filled with tears. "This isn't fair. Life isn't fair, kid, but sometimes we get to choose how our story ends." I pulled out my emergency whistle and handed it to him. "When you hear the explosion, blow this 3 times, long blasts. Any rangers in the area will come running. What if there are more cultists? Then you tell them Ranger Brooks died in the line of duty, and they need to evacuate the entire park until federal investigators can figure out what the hell happened here." Another tentacle crashed down, this one close enough to feel the wind from its passage. We were out of time. "Go," I said. "Run for the main road and don't look back." Ryan hesitated for one more second, then threw his arms around me in a fierce hug. "Thank you," he whispered. Then he was gone, crashing through the underbrush toward safety. I turned to face the Great Sleeper. The timer on the bomb showed 6 minutes and 43 seconds. I needed to get to the exact center of the ritual site, the spot where Ryan had been bound, the spot where the creature kept emerging from underground. The cultists had formed a line between me and the center point, their inhuman faces twisted with rage. Behind them, the Great Sleeper rose to its full height, tentacles weaving hypnotic patterns in the air. "You cannot stop the awakening," the lead cultist hissed. "The Great Sleeper has tasted blood. It will not return to dreams." "Maybe not," I said, pulling the pins from the dynamite with my teeth. but I'm going to make it really fucking hard for you to explain to the next batch of investigators. I ran straight at them. The cultists were fast, but they weren't expecting a direct assault. I barreled through their line like a linebacker, using my shoulder to knock two of them aside. Claws raked across my back, tearing through my jacket and shirt to the skin underneath. But I kept running. The center point was 50 feet away. 40. 30. A tentacle wrapped around my waist and lifted me into the air. I found myself face to face with one of the Great Sleeper's many mouths, rows of teeth spinning like a garbage disposal. The smell was indescribable. Rotting meat and sulfur and something else. Something that made my brain want to shut down rather than process it. Timer. 4 minutes, 12 seconds. I still had the pins in my mouth. I bit down hard, feeling the metal pins snap. The timer mechanisms on the remaining charges started their countdown. Even if the creature killed me now, the explosion would happen exactly where it needed to. The Great Sleeper seemed to realize what I'd done. Its grip loosened slightly, tentacles writhing with what might have been confusion or fear. That's when I heard the gunshots. 3 quick shots from a high-powered rifle coming from the tree line to the north. One of the cultists spun and fell, black blood spurting from its chest. The others scattered, looking for the source of the attack. "Federal agents," a voice shouted. "Drop your weapons and get on the ground." The cavalry had arrived. Somehow someone had gotten word out. Maybe Ryan had found a working phone. Maybe another ranger had noticed my extended absence. Maybe Patricia Buchanan had called the FBI when the Park Service stopped returning her calls. The Great Sleeper roared and released me, turning to face this new threat. I hit the ground hard. The wind knocked out of my lungs, but managed to keep hold of the backpack. Timer, 2 minutes, 58 seconds. I crawled toward the center point as gunfire erupted around the campsite. The federal agents, I could see at least 4 of them now, were using some kind of special ammunition that actually seemed to hurt the creature. Each shot that connected made it shriek and writhe. But it was still too strong. Tentacles lashed out, grabbing one of the agents and lifting him toward its mouths. The man screamed as the creature began to feed. Timer. 1 minute, 43 seconds. I reached the center point, a depression in the earth where the creature kept emerging. Up close, I could see it wasn't natural. Someone had carved symbols into the rock at the bottom, the same twisted crosses and serpentine shapes I'd seen at the foundation sites. The focal point, the anchor that kept the creature connected to our world. I placed the backpack directly on top of the carved symbols and activated the manual detonation switch. Red numbers appeared on the timer: 0030, 0029, 0028. "Everyone back," I screamed. 30 seconds to detonation. The federal agents didn't need to be told twice. They grabbed their wounded teammate and ran for the forest. The remaining cultists tried to follow, but the Great Sleeper was in full panic mode now, tentacles thrashing wildly as it tried to reach the bomb. 015, 014, 013. One massive tentacle wrapped around my ankle and dragged me away from the center point. I clawed at the earth, trying to stop my movement, but the creature was too strong. 008, Zorzo 7, Drozo 6. I managed to grab a handful of rocks and threw them at the creature's nearest eye cluster. It was a futile gesture, but the thing flinched anyway, loosening its grip just enough for me to break free. Croso 3, Troso 2, Crusoe 1. I dove behind Ryan's overturned camp table and covered my head with my arms. The explosion lit up the night like a miniature sun. The shockwave hit me like a physical wall, lifting me off the ground and slamming me into a tree 20 feet away. My ears rang, my vision went white, and for a moment I thought I might be dead. But gradually sensation returned. Pain in my back where the cultists had clawed me, warmth trickling down my face from a head wound, the taste of dirt and blood in my mouth, and silence. Blessed, wonderful silence. I opened my eyes to see a crater where the center of the campsite used to be. The hole was easily 30 feet across and impossibly deep. No sign of the Great Sleeper, no sign of the cultists, just scattered camping equipment and the lingering smell of sulfur. "Ranger Brooks," someone was calling my name. I turned to see Ryan running toward me, followed by 4 people in FBI tactical gear. "Is it over?" I asked as Ryan helped me sit up. "I think so." He looked toward the crater. The whole cave system collapsed. Whatever was down there, it's buried under about 1,000,000 tons of rock. One of the federal agents knelt beside me, checking my injuries with practiced efficiency. "Agent Sarah Chen, FBI Supernatural Crimes Division," she said. "We got a call from dispatch about your equipment malfunctions. When we couldn't raise you on radio, we sent a team to investigate." "Supernatural Crimes Division?" I asked. "That's a real thing?" "More real than we'd like," Agent Chen said grimly. "This isn't the first resurgent cult we've dealt with. There are others out there, and they're getting bolder." She helped me to my feet, supporting my weight as we walked toward the crater. "The good news is that you and Mr. Buchanan managed to disrupt their ritual before it could be completed. The entity they were trying to wake up is gone, permanently from what our sensors are reading." "And the bad news?" "The bad news is that there are at least 6 other sites like this one scattered across the southeastern United States. And now that we know the cults are active again, we have a lot of work to do." Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to the other cult sites. I read every single one. Epilogue. 3 months later, I received a commendation from the Department of Interior for exceptional bravery in the line of duty. The official report listed the incident as armed confrontation with domestic terrorist cell. No mention of supernatural entities or ancient cults or creatures that shouldn't exist. Ryan went back to college, but he calls me every week. He's changed his major to archaeology, specializing in Native American religious sites. He says someone needs to document the real history of these places before more cultists try to exploit them. Patricia Buchanan sent me a fruit basket and a handwritten note. "Thank you for bringing my son home." I kept the note. On bad days, when the nightmares get too vivid and I start questioning whether any of it really happened, I read her words and remember why I became a ranger in the first place. Agent Chen offered me a position with the FBI Supernatural Crimes Division. I turned it down. The mountains are my home, and there are too many good people who depend on rangers like me to keep them safe. But I kept her card, just in case. Because I know the truth now. The darkness is real, and it's always been here, hiding in the spaces between what we understand and what we're willing to believe. And sometimes on quiet nights when the wind moves through the trees just right, I can still hear them chanting in the distance. The old ways never really die. They just wait for their time to return. My name is Jake Sullivan, and this was the 18th hour searching for Cameron Walsh in the trails of Shoshone National Forest. My GPS unit had been glitching for the past 3 hours, showing coordinates that put me simultaneously at elevation 7,942 feet and somehow 400 feet underground. The kind of malfunction that shouldn't happen with military-grade equipment, but here we were. I adjusted my tactical pack and checked my radio again. "Base, this is Ranger Sullivan. Grid reference 44, 3928 north, 110,052 west. Still no sign of the subject." Static answered me. The same electric hiss that had been my only companion since the temperature dropped 15 degrees in the span of 2 minutes around noon. Cameron Walsh. 23 years old, art student from Portland, had been camping alone for 4 days before his sister reported him missing. His campsite sat intact 3 miles behind me. Tent perfectly pitched, food properly stored in bare canisters, even his coffee still lukewarm in a titanium mug when I'd found it yesterday morning. No signs of struggle, no blood, no tracks leading away. Like he'd simply vanished mid-sip. The sister's voice still echoed in my head from this morning's call. "Please, Ranger Sullivan, you have to find him. He's all I have left since Dad died. Cameron's not reckless. He wouldn't just wander off. Something's wrong. Something's really wrong." My shoulders tensed involuntarily, muscles bunching like coiled springs. 22 years of military service had taught me to trust my instincts, and every instinct screamed that this wasn't a standard missing person case. The forest felt Off. Wrong in ways my tactical training couldn't quantify. I stopped at a fork in the trail, consulting my topographic map. According to the paper version, the left path led to Miller's Creek, a known water source where lost hikers often headed. My digital compass spun lazily, unable to find magnetic north. I tapped it twice, the same sharp double tap I'd used on malfunctioning equipment in Afghanistan, but the needle continued its aimless dance. Fucking electronics, I muttered, pulling out my backup analog compass. Military habit died hard. Always carry redundancy for mission-critical gear. That's when I heard it. The soft shuffle of playing cards being shuffled, drifting from somewhere ahead on the left trail. My breathing became shallow and rapid, like trying to suck air through a straw. The sound was impossibly crisp in the thick forest air, each card's edge sliding against the next with mechanical precision. I approached the sound with tactical movement, heel-to-toe steps, weight distributed, avoiding branches that might snap. My hand instinctively moved to my service weapon, fingers tracing the familiar weight of my Glock 19. 22 years of muscle memory didn't just disappear because you traded fatigues for a ranger uniform. 50 meters ahead, a figure sat at what appeared to be a wooden table materialized from nothing. The man wore a perfectly pressed charcoal suit that wouldn't have looked out of place in 1940s Chicago, complete with suspenders and a silver pocket watch chain. His hair was slicked back with pomade, and he shuffled a deck of cards with supernatural smoothness. Each flip and cascade performed with inhuman precision. My vision narrowed to a tunnel, peripheral sight disappearing like someone had installed blinders. The rational part of my brain cataloged impossibilities. No trail markers indicated a campsite here. No permit records showed anyone authorized for backcountry camping in this grid, and the table appeared to be growing directly from the forest floor. "Afternoon, Ranger Sullivan," the man said without looking up from his cards. His voice carried the faint echo of old radio broadcasts, tinny and distant despite being 20 feet away. "Fine day for a search, wouldn't you say?" My mandible locked with such force I heard my molars grinding. He knew my name. He knew why I was here. "How do you know who I am?" I kept my voice level, professional. Military bearing demanded composure even when facing the impossible. "Oh, I know many things." The man finally looked up, revealing eyes like polished silver dollars, completely without iris or pupil, just reflective metallic surfaces. "I know you've been searching for young Cameron for 18 hours and 14 minutes. I know you're questioning your equipment's reliability. And I know you're wondering if you're losing your mind." Cold sweat beaded instantly on my forehead despite the October chill. The temperature around the table felt 20 degrees colder than the surrounding forest, my breath now visible in small puffs that shouldn't exist in 50-degree weather. "Where is Cameron Walsh?" I demanded, hand moving to my radio. The display showed nothing but dead static lines. Not even the emergency channel responded. "Ah, straight to business. I appreciate military efficiency." The gambler continued shuffling, cards moving in patterns that hurt to follow with the naked eye. The young man in question made a wager with me 3 days ago. A simple game of chance, really. Winner takes all. What kind of wager? My fingers went numb, losing sensation despite my tactical gloves. I flexed them twice, trying to restore circulation. The finest kind, a bet where the stakes truly matter. He spread 5 cards face down on the table with a flourish. Cameron wagered his freedom against the chance to see his deceased father one more time. The boy was quite insistent, despite my warnings about the house odds. My stomach contracted like someone had punched me in the solar plexus. Cameron's sister had mentioned their father's death, but not the devastation it had left behind. A grieving young man, alone in the wilderness, vulnerable to whatever this thing was. "Show me where he is." I stepped closer, tactical training warring with common sense. Every military protocol screamed to call for backup, establish perimeter, assess threat level. But my radio was dead. My GPS showed impossible coordinates, and backup was 40 miles away. Oh, but that would spoil the game. The gambler's silver eyes reflected my image in impossible angles, showing me from perspectives that couldn't exist. "You see, Ranger Sullivan, Cameron's debt has been transferred. Someone must complete his wager before he can be released. I don't gamble. My voice came out rougher than intended, vocal cords constricting involuntarily. Everyone gambles, soldier boy. Every mission you ran in Afghanistan was a calculated risk. Every life or death decision in uniform was a roll of the dice against fate. He leaned forward and the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. My breath now came out in thick clouds. The question is, how much is young Cameron's life worth to you? My leg muscles tensed to the point of cramping fight-or-flight responses, flooding my system with adrenaline I couldn't use. This wasn't a battlefield where superior firepower and tactical positioning mattered. This was something else entirely. What's the game? The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Simple 5-card draw. High hand wins. The gambler's smile revealed teeth like yellowed piano keys. You win, Cameron goes free, and you both walk away. I win. He paused, savoring the moment. Well, let's just say the forest gains 2 new permanent residents. I thought of Cameron's sister, her desperate voice pleading for her brother's return. I thought of the oath I'd sworn as a ranger to protect visitors to these lands. And I thought of the 22 years of military service that had taught me never to leave a man behind. Deal the cards. The gambler's laughter echoed through the trees like wind chimes made of bone. Excellent. Though I should mention, this particular deck has some unique properties. The cards show not what is, but what might be. Reality becomes somewhat fluid during play. As he dealt 5 cards to each of us, the forest around the table began to shift and blur. Trees stretched impossibly tall, their branches intertwining overhead in geometric patterns that made my eyes water. The afternoon sun flickered like a dying light bulb, casting shadows that moved independently of their objects. I picked up my cards with hands that trembled despite years of weapons training. The faces were wrong. Instead of traditional suits, each card showed scenes that shifted and moved like tiny movies. A woman weeping over a grave, a man falling into darkness, a family gathering around an empty chair, a soldier's funeral with unfolded flag. The game begins, the gambler announced, and reality cracked like ice under pressure. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Jake Sullivan's situation? Comment below. The cards in my hand felt warm, almost alive, pulsing with a heartbeat that wasn't mine. Military training had prepared me for chemical weapons, interrogation resistance, and combat stress. But nothing in the field manual covered supernatural gambling with entities that bent reality. Your play, Ranger Sullivan, the gambler prompted, his silver eyes reflecting scenes I didn't want to understand. I studied my hand. 5 cards showing moving images of death, loss, and endings. The rational part of my brain insisted this was hallucination brought on by exhaustion and stress. The soldier's instinct that had kept me alive in 2 combat deployments whispered something different entirely. I need to see Cameron first, I said, voice steadier than I felt. Proof of life before any deal proceeds. The gambler chuckled and snapped his fingers. The air 20 feet to our left shimmered like heat mirages, then cleared to reveal Cameron Walsh, sitting motionless on a fallen log. His eyes were open but vacant, staring at something beyond the visible world. His mouth moved constantly, forming silent words I couldn't read. As you can see, young Cameron is quite safe. He's simply elsewhere at the moment, experiencing a visit with his departed father as promised. Whether that becomes permanent depends entirely on our game. My pulse hammered against my neck like a jackhammer. Cameron looked physically unharmed but mentally absent, lost in whatever illusion the gambler had created. The kid's lips kept moving in the same pattern. Dad? Dad? Where are you going? 3 cards, I said, discarding the 3 lowest values from my impossible hand. Ah, playing conservatively. Very military of you. The gambler dealt 3 replacement cards with theatrical flourish. Though I should mention, in this particular game, traditional poker hands hold no meaning. Victory goes to whoever holds the strongest connection to their deepest desire. The new cards showed different scenes. A ranger's badge being pinned on my chest for the first time. My wife Sarah kissing me goodbye before my last deployment. My daughter Emma's first steps while I was overseas, captured in a photo someone else had to take. Your hand represents something you want, Ranger Sullivan. The cards know your heart better than you do. The gambler laid down his 5 cards face up. Each showed Cameron Walsh in different scenarios. Cameron falling from a cliff, Cameron consumed by flames, Cameron drowning in dark water, Cameron being buried alive, Cameron aging to death in seconds. And my hand represents young Cameron's fate should you lose. Quite the motivational display, wouldn't you agree? My breathing turned rapid and shallow, like trying to breathe through wet cloth. The images on my cards intensified, becoming more vivid and real. In one, I saw myself receiving a Medal of Valor for this rescue. In another, Sarah welcomed me home from the forest as a hero. The third showed Emma, now 8 years old, bragging to her friends about her dad, the ranger who saved people. Personal glory versus another person's life, the gambler observed. A classic moral equation, though I suspect your military honor code has already determined your choice. Without hesitation, I flipped my cards face down on the table. I forfeit my hand. The gambler's silver eyes widened, the first crack in his supernatural composure. I beg your pardon? You heard me. I forfeit. Cameron wins by default. I stood up, hand moving instinctively to my sidearm. The kid goes free. That's not how the game works. For the first time, the gambler's voice carried genuine surprise instead of theatrical confidence. You must play your hand. The rules require... I make my own rules. I drew my Glock, muscle memory guiding the smooth draw and aim motion I'd practiced 10,000 times. 22 years military service taught me that sometimes the only winning move is changing the game entirely. The gambler's form began to flicker and distort like a TV with bad reception. You cannot simply refuse to play. The wager was made. The debt exists. Cameron was coerced by grief into a game he didn't understand. That makes any contract null and void. I kept the weapon trained on center mass, though I doubted bullets would affect this thing. Military code of conduct. No one left behind. That includes naive college kids who got in over their heads. The forest around us started to dissolve, trees becoming transparent, the table sinking into earth that no longer looked solid. The gambler's carefully pressed suit began to tatter and fade, revealing something underneath that I didn't want to see clearly. You think your human weapons can harm me? He snarled, silver eyes now glowing with malevolent light. I think you're afraid to find out. I adjusted my stance, taking proper firing position. Otherwise, you wouldn't be trying to convince me to play your rigged game instead of just taking what you want. Cameron Walsh suddenly gasped and jerked upright, his vacant stare snapping back to awareness. He looked around wildly, focusing on me with desperate relief. Ranger Sullivan, thank God, I've been trapped in this nightmare for days. There was this man and he said he could let me talk to my dad again, and I just wanted... Save it for the debriefing, son. Can you walk? I kept my weapon trained on the gambler while addressing Cameron. I think so. Cameron struggled to his feet, visibly weak but functional. The gambler let out a shriek of frustration that shattered 3 pine branches overhead. This is not over, soldier. You've merely delayed the inevitable. The debt will be collected. Send me a bill, I replied, then addressed Cameron without looking away from the threat. Move toward the trail behind me. Stay close. Watch your footing. And if I tell you to run, you sprint like your life depends on it. As Cameron stumbled toward safety, the supernatural tableau continued its dissolution. The gambler's table cracked down the middle, cards scattering into wind that carried them beyond the realm of physical possibility. The entity himself was becoming increasingly transparent, his form losing cohesion like smoke in a hurricane. You've won this round, Jake Sullivan, he called as he faded. But the house always wins eventually, always. The forest snapped back to normal reality with an almost audible pop. Temperature returned to normal October levels. My GPS began functioning again and radio static cleared to reveal dispatch calling my name with increasing urgency. Ranger Sullivan, respond immediately. We have teams mobilizing for your grid reference. I holstered my weapon and grabbed the radio. Base, this is Sullivan, subject located and secured, requesting immediate medical evaluation and extraction at my current coordinates. Cameron Walsh collapsed against a pine tree, shaking with exhaustion and residual terror. Ranger Sullivan, what was that thing? How did you? Official report will say you got disoriented and wandered off trail, I interrupted, helping him stabilize. Dehydration and hypothermia caused hallucinations. Standard mountain rescue scenario. But we both experienced altitude-related stress reactions, I said firmly, meeting his eyes. Nothing more, nothing supernatural. Just a scared kid who got lost and a ranger who found him using standard search protocols. Cameron stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Altitude stress. Right. That makes sense. As we waited for the extraction team, I reflected on the encounter. Military service had taught me that some battles were won through superior firepower, others through tactical superiority, and still others through moral courage. Today had been the third type. The gambler had made one crucial error. He'd assumed I cared more about winning than about doing what was right. 22 years of military service had taught me the difference between those two concepts, and sometimes the greatest victory came from refusing to play by your enemy's rules. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Emma's soccer game is at 3 p.m. tomorrow. You promised you'd be there. I smiled for the first time in 18 hours. Some promises were worth more than any supernatural wager. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Cameron Walsh. I read every single one. Epilogue. 3 months later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a single playing card, the Queen of Hearts, but the face showed Sarah and Emma sitting at our kitchen table, waiting for me to come home from a shift that would never end. On the back, someone had written in flowing script, "The house always wins eventually, Jake Sullivan. Always." I burned the card in our fireplace that night, but kept the ashes in a mason jar on my desk at the ranger station. Some reminders are worth keeping, even when they represent threats you hope never to face again. Cameron Walsh returned to Portland, changed majors from art to psychology, and now counsels people dealing with grief and loss. He sends me a Christmas card every year, always with the same message. Thank you for bringing me home. He never mentions the altitude stress, neither do I. But sometimes late at night when I'm on patrol in the deep forest, I hear the soft shuffle of cards being dealt somewhere in the darkness ahead. On those nights, I check my weapon, verify my radio, and remember that some games are won by refusing to play. The house may always win eventually, but not today, not on my watch.